Oosh, tēnā tātou. Planting seeds, no mai, hoki mai, wherever you're tuning in from. Very stoked that you're choosing to tune into the Planting Seeds podcast. And I'm sure if you are listening, it's because of our next guest. E te tuahine, Hinerapa no mai, ki Planting Seeds. E pehe ana koe tuahine?
E pai ana. Yeah, haere ko ana ki te kōrero, ki te wānanga i te whānau.
Obviously been doing this for a little while, and your name has come up so many times.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and honestly, just in the last week,
Oh.
twice.
Oh, goodbye.
Ngā Rāwhitiroa and the bro Jay, who
Wanakore?
works. Yes, Wanakore. Yeah. So them two, just in the span of a week, have suggested you, and you've been in whakaaro because, you know, ōpukenga, things that you get up to, things that you're about. And so I'm just, really pleased that we've got this time to wānanga and things have freed up. And I guess I'll start with, why do you think that has been coming up quite a lot in terms of your hoa, wanting to sort of encourage this kind of wānanga in space?
To be honest, I don't really know why they have been suggesting me, other than maybe the kaupapa that I have been a part of. Definitely as of recently, such as a big voyage that happened in Te Moana nui a Kiwa, but I wouldn't really know other than that, because when you live in a world that's quite normal to you, speaking te reo Māori, teaching te reo, or just in te ao Māori in general, you don't really think your world is as great as many may think it is. So that's why I'm kind of struggling to understand why. Yeah. However, other than that, it could be just my love maybe for te ao Māori.
That's beautiful, but I can honestly resonate with you in regards to that, just in how you can be so caught up in the doing or the living, and you know that it's good, and you're grateful for many parts of it, but it's just the norms, as you say, and it is what it is. And that aligns to something that I've been sharing a lot recently, which is around how bored is good. Like, being bored in your life is that, like, that should be celebrated,
yes,
Like,
white space. Yeah. We need a little bit more.
So how whakaaro e pāna ki tērā? Like, what are your thoughts on that, just around, I guess, the normalness in life and I guess the boredom that comes with it, but how can we start to enjoy those things that make up our life?
Yeah, I think, well, in terms of boredom, it wasn't something that I had thought was important until maybe in the last 2 years where my life got hectic. And I couldn't really grasp how good it was throughout all of those things, because there are a lot of mihi coming through where all I could see was myself burning out and not getting any space for boredom because I had to be on the go continuously. I was, for the last 2 to maybe 3, no, definitely 2 years, but my life looked like at least 4 towns in 1 week, and driving all the way down south and going as far as, and then going up north, and then doing things because I thought kaupapa was, my responsibility to kaupapa was important, that once I came home from fulfilling a dream that I had dreamt of for a long time, I understood then, because I had to, we were disconnected from the world, that boredom actually made me feel grateful. Where I didn't feel grateful, even though a lot of people may have thought that my life was quite fab on that from an out, external point of view. But I didn't feel that internally until I felt bored.
Because you had time to rest, and settle and just
think sometimes.
Yeah.
I could actually internalize things in quite a deep way, where being on the go, you can be on the shallow waters at some times, and seeking others, like this kind of conversation, to be able to not entice, but a certain type of conversation. But that's kind of where I led myself to be in. And I was addicted to strong relationships with people, because there was a part of me, like curiosity, that I wasn't exercising or just thinking without Googling something, or thinking for myself rather than hopping or jumping on somebody else's idea.
Man,
yeah,
that's mighty, and that's, I feel, the culture that we've been kind of, raised into an extent, whether it's social media, whether it's the external expectations that kind of mold this version of, like, is this what you need to be in order to whether feel successful or feel some kind of way?
Yeah.
As opposed to, and sometimes it just takes walking that huarahi to realize, like, oh, maybe this ain't the way, but it gives the experiences, eh? And when we talk about, some of those pathways and experiences, what kind of things when we go back into perhaps those earlier stages, Hinerapa as a kōtiro, and what were some of those experiences or some of those pathways that were normal, but, a part of like your life at that time?
Well, I'm very fortunate with the kura that I was brought up in, Hoani Waititi. Kōhanga reo kura kaupapa, whare kura, through and through. I pakeke mai mātou ko tōku whānau, Hoani Waititi. So come with that, like, the collective responsibility or the collective mind even was something that was very normal to us. We were always at the marae. My papa managed the marae for a long time, and now my grandparents live at the marae. Our whenua was actually buried, and our pito was buried at the marae. And so for a lot of ones back home, it could sound like fake Māori sometimes. But Hoani Waititi for us was definitely a place where we could just be, where talking Māori, speaking Māori is very normal. Running a marae was very normal. It's probably like the first akoranga that we have growing up, and that's where I learned how to speak to people.
Cool.
Manners, how to be respectful, how to be presentable because you are hosting, how to clean a wharepukai, and knowing that gives you a sense of pride because when other people walk in, they feel manakitanga. And so those types of things that were very normal to us, now coming out, understanding that it's not. And so also understanding I don't necessarily like the word privilege in this sense, only because it takes away from a lot of the hard work.
True.
When it comes to the privilege that has been used, such as white privilege, or, now they're calling it brown privilege, where Māori are successful and they were given te reo and all of those things. Like, we also got to understand our Paikiki, like, put mortgages, like, they put their houses on the line to feed the kaiako e Hoani Waititi in the beginning. And the kaiako, like Katerina, was getting paid potatoes from the whānau to teach our tamariki and to create all the resources herself by hand, books that were created by A3 papers and sellotape together. And so I do understand that I do have a privilege, but to say that it's privilege alone, I feel like I'm taking away from my Paikiki that sacrifice a lot. And so, yeah, those sorts of norms that, we all fundraised for each other to do a lot of things. Like, they'll say, oh, I have some successes that were all because of my kura, all of them. But, for example, doing wakama internationally and training at Worlds, for Māori, it's quite very normal, but for a whānau like mine, where we were very poor, like my dad would work every day, every week for $200, 14 hours a day, and having 6 children. And a lot of people thought because of I got to go to Worlds or all of those things, I got to live in Italy for a year, that it was because my family were rich. But no, it was our hapori.
The hapori.
Yeah, they were rich. Like, they all fundraised for me to get there. And the richness came first in believing in each other and having each other's back. And so Whitiki Taua is you'll hear it in a lot of Waititi songs, but that's how we are. Some people call us a cult. And to be honest, I like it.
Well, that's home. I'm getting all the good feels just thinking about that. And the feels is like warmth, manakitanga, being supported and, pautuara, you've got people behind you and beside you. And one of the main phrases that I walked away from a recent wānanga was just around like a Māori outlook is more collaborative rather than competition.
Definitely.
And that's the kind of kōrero that you've said is, where there's a collective, there's a collaboration, and that's a real Māori way of being, eh? And you just gave examples of even just being on a marae. Everyone's got a job to do, but everyone's there for the same purpose, manakitanga, aroha, and awhi. And so, when we think about that, there's a lot of kōrero out there at the moment around te reo Māori, and, for you, that has been a real taonga. And so for someone like myself who was there and just got to go on away and then come back. And so would you see your reanga as that kind of mokopuna generation that's kind of like come into a space where, it is a real strength as opposed to what it had been?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And, we're still seeing that in the generations today with my mother, my grandparents who don't speak te reo, and having, I also believe that it's the next generation as well. Like I have one nephew and 4 or 3 nieces, and the 3 that can speak are fluent.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's more them.
Right.
That's the real generation. Definitely us now. And one thing that I am very grateful for is that I can explain all of my feelings and my thoughts in te reo Māori. And it doesn't matter that ko te tika o te reo, I'm very lucky that I have that as well. But I think if a child can explain themselves fully and express themselves fully, also with values and perspectives and attitudes and behaviours that are Māori, then, we're winning. And I feel like that'll be the next generation. Some of us still had to learn that.
Yeah.
But for them, ka Māori noi hoki a rātou.
Are you just hard out proud, like auntie and all of that, when you're just seeing your, nieces and nephews just really just celebrate that, and, ke te rere pai te reo, and they're expressing themselves, fully. And so, what are some of the internalizations that you have when you're, I guess, seeing, the next generations, and how, because it's so cool to be Māori, and you've probably always felt that, or maybe have had times, but there was a real stench of a lot of whānau just not being proud of being Māori, but you're seeing this next generation, and man, they are staunch and they are proud and they're loud about it. And for me, I'm just like, let's go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, when I watch our tamariki, I don't know, it's because we're all of our aukura and all of our kids live that world. So, and we work together, we train together, we share our lives together, we hugga together. So the things that go on internally in me is, to be honest, I don't get amazed. Like, I just like, it should be like that.
It should be, yeah.
It should be that way. And or maybe some things, like when I taught my nephew, I taught him a few stars when he was like 2. And then his sister's a year younger than him and taught her the same. And now they can point at the mountain, at 4 and 3 years old at the time. And there was maybe from, these are like the stars that we learned in our karakia. And so for them, for it to be a part of their life where they can build that connection, not only through song, and that's still beautiful, and that's where I started, was through songs. But at a young age, they can talk to them and seek guidance from them and understand that and have awareness of that at that age. That's something that I'm very proud of.
You're already building their relationship there. Which is a good segue because, we're talking about Hoani Waititi, we're talking about stars, and, one of your pukingas, being a voyager, wayfinder, me ki, or and the image that I've got in my mind when I think about that is when you were leaving in your recent haerenga from Tāmaki, your ope was there, your whānau were there, Hoani Waititi was there, and they gave you fellas a mean send-off. And so I just thought that was a good segue into, one of your pukinga, which is the space. And, how did that start for you? And I guess, what are the main things that really got you into it, to doing this recent voyage?
Definitely my upbringing, but what had kind of sealed the deal for me in terms of pursuing voyaging was I had to really wānanga with myself around what success meant to me. Because I, grew up kura kōhanga, and I thought that once you leave school, because I was told that success meant a degree. And so I had moved to Italy in my last year for a year and then come back home. Prior to, I thought that I needed to go and become either a lawyer or a doctor. Those two, because one, I did love to advocate for people, or doctors because I love to look after people. And I also really enjoyed science and maths. But once I come back, I soon realised that my upbringing was very rare, and the taonga that I had couldn't be gifted as much as maybe somebody who could become a lawyer or a doctor. And this may sound whakahihi, I don't mean it in that way, and being a lawyer or a doctor is definitely still successful. But I thought when I come back, anybody could be a lawyer or a doctor, but nobody could gift te reo Māori or te kanga Māori in a depth that many of us at Kura Kaupapa Māori were very fortunate enough to do. And then I decided to approach somebody. His name is Mahara Nicholas, who spoke about voyaging at Huinga Reo. So Kura Kaupapa Māori have two big events. First one is Huinga Reo ngā Kura Kaupapa. Second one is Wikiha, and they go biannually, and they do it the opposite year. Right. Huinga Reo is a whole week of year 11 and 13 coming together, living with each other, doing all these activities purely in te reo Māori so that we could see that we have other mates that live the world that we do, that die for our kura, that are there 24/7, that are fundraising, doing every kapaka, netball, touch, rugby, waka, and doing it all together and having each other's backs. So to see that others do it as well is kind of like for us a sense of, oh, okay, maybe I am lucky.
Yeah.
Because even though it doesn't feel like it, and I actually at that time hate it, but it's actually something to be really, really grateful for. And then Wikiha is where we play sports and compete against each other for a whole week. So he spoke about a voyage to Rapa Nui. First leg, 43 days. That's unheard of. You know, it was supposed to be 26. They prepared the waka for 36, meaning enough kai and enough water. But it took them 43.
Wow.
And at that moment, 3-4 storms, at least 4 days. And I was listening to this kōrero and I looked at that person and I was like, I want that. I want this. And I was very...
The adventure.
Yeah, the adventure, the te rongo I te nui o ngā atua. Me te hohonu, me te... te rongo I te hina whanau I taku kiri, te mōhio ki taku iti, te whera I ngā kōrero tuku iho, e orai mātou I te waka. Te toro atu ki a rātou, pai ai tā rātou ārahi I a mātou. That was a sense of feeling that I yearned for once I heard that kōrero. And so I grew up paddling as well. So
your connection to the Moana.
To the Moana was very strong. I think I started at 7 or something. And after paddling for a long time, you kind of think, okay, where to from now? And so I was like, I kind of got to that. But I was like 17 and I was like, I think I'm done.
Yeah.
But I'm only 17, goodness. Dramatic. But yeah, and so the following year I came back from Italy. I seen him at Wikiha and I approached Mahara about it. And luckily for me, 2 weeks after was the beginning of the new cohort of Te Kura Waka.
Right.
Which is a traditional Salesian non-instrumental navigation school run by poor navigator Jack Thatcher. And so both my best friend and I went, and we stayed on 10, and it's been 10 years since.
Wow.
Yeah.
Out.
And so that was awesome. And then I also went to university. I studied linguistics and anthropology for a year, done first semester, second semester in summer school, passed all my papers, but I felt probably the most defeated I had ever felt in my life. My kōrero tuku iho weren't very supported. At the time, we were learning about the Great Migration, Anthro 104, and it was amazing, and I learned a lot, but there was a richness that I could not feel in there, and that was kōrero tuku iho, the evidence that could support my argument. A lot of the time is like archaeological.
What does that mean? What's archaeological?
Meaning, so like dates back to like when we got here, and like we got to use those types of ways of proving our arguments that our tipuna right here, like lapita pottery or bones, and those were means of I guess proving your point.
Evidence of it. Yeah.
And so that was very difficult for me to only rely on types of kōrero that, yes, were amazing, but there was a whole body of knowledge that I couldn't explore because it was based on what somebody had said. And it wasn't peer-reviewed. It wasn't written by somebody who is renowned for the research.
It almost zaps, it almost zaps the inspiration of you just coming up against those kinds of brick walls. But there's a real strong knowing and believing in there.
Kōrero. And then when you get told that you have to play the game, sometimes until you become a doctor to be able to then and I'm like, that's going to take me 10 years and I'm going to be playing somebody else's game for what, you know? And so that's when I really had to dig deep and ask myself, so what does success mean to you? Does it mean a degree still, even though tō ngākau o whakaaro, tō tinana, tō wairua kāre e rongo i te ora. You're barely holding on based on what somebody else deems as success. And so I had to really look at my values and the values that we were brought up with. And in Te Aho Matua, the first part of Te Aho Matua says, you know, he kākano koe iru ia mai rangi a te kore koe ngaro, kia marama rawa te hunga whakaako ki te ahu o te tamaiti. There's a part that talks about conception and where our Māori, our tapu, our iho matua, our pūmanawa, our everything that makes us who we are comes from conception. And i te rāwā tonu, ka hono te wairua me te tinana o te tamaiti roto i te kōpū a whānau noa. And to have a kaupapa that's supposed to be just your school talk about you as what makes who you are to be who you are from conception, and then I'm going to try and fulfill this, you know, little shallow need. It's like, am I doing this kaupapa justice? Am I doing myself justice? You know, for somebody to talk about my importance, and I come from Rangiatea, and I have all of these great gifts inside of me, to not listen to them. Like, that's not success. And so when I missed out on a voyage because I chose university, I missed out on 2 to 3 months of voyaging with my mates and my kaiako because I chose university. And the following year, I decided to go out on the waka, and I had 2 weeks until my semester started. And in that 2 weeks, I was alive again. Every part of me. And not even just like hinengaro tinana ngākau pūmanawa puku, everything. It was like the kid in me was alive because I was having an adventure that I never thought I'd have. Like we would park up somewhere because there's no one, so we'd jump in the water in the middle of the ocean. No one's there, you know, or we had to wait. So we'll be next to these rocks and we'll go for a dive and have a look if there's kai. Or we'll be like blessed by dolphins in the morning and, you know, fishing, as well as learning about the stars, as well as seeing the stars, as well as almost touching the stars so that they could guide us. You know, all of these things that were a part of me just like ignited again. And to me, that's success. Now that I know that. And ever since, that's what I have been striving for, is to feel that again, to feel that learner girl in me, to feel that curious girl in me. And so that's why I decided to go towards navigation. And also navigation, like not everybody is going to become a navigator or a wayfinder. Some people are better as crew, and some people are better as captains, and some people are better as maybe the quartermaster because their pūmanawa and their iho matua and their Māori, their wehi align to those responsibilities. You know, it's not, we don't all have to be
it's not hierarchical.
It's not hierarchical at all, because we are nothing if we don't have a quartermaster. Like if we have no kai, we're dead. You know, and if we don't have a captain who can lead us, like no doubt, the biggest thing that's important on waka, in my opinion, is people. You know, if you have any raru inside of you, that could be very high risk for everybody. And that's, you know, life and death when you're out on the waka. But if you have people who will show up for each other, who will go hard, you know, who are tired, if you're a navigator or just even a captain, you're asleep for maybe 2 hours a day. But if you can show up and smile to your mates and get up and say, that's us, 2 hours sleep, with that kind of attitude, you can get anywhere in the world. And so a hierarchy on the waka is semi-non-existent because you need everyone. And to elevate only one position is, in my opinion, can cause a lot of problems. But if we start elevating each other, because we all have a role, then everything will move and the waka will flow and we'll sail into the wind with pumping waves behind us,
Yeah.
And the sun is kissing us, or the moon. It's just a beautiful feeling, even if you're in a storm. And that's something that I think could be taken in every scenario, is people is everything. And I was fortunate enough to be raised around people that told me I was everything since the beginning.
Man, you've just been given all of the beliefs and ways of being and thinking from a very young age. And I really like how you just used your lived experience to really create learnings for yourself. But what I saw and what I heard was just when we're trying to, I guess, mold ourselves into one particular pathway and we're feeling just out of alignment. And, you're doing your best and you're actually, like even though you said you're passing, you're doing actually well. But there's a knowing that there's something missing. There's like a void. And sometimes we think it's this path is once we get to the end that's going to fill it. But sometimes it's not often the case. But it's a thing that we can almost lean into and just have those more deeper wānanga with ourselves around, okay, like where am I? What are the things that I'm interested in? Or can I just come back to myself and I guess settle there for a little bit and then I guess move out? And what I heard as well is, once you actually got out onto the Moana, ioho, you came back into the space of alignment of in tow of just being like, this is that feeling of this is exactly where I'm meant to be, eh?
Yeah.
And so I really like how, success isn't really what we're doing, but it's more so around how we are and we are within ourselves based on what it is that we're doing. And so that could be around people, that could be in mahi, that could be even just within yourself. So the thing that was also coming up for me as we're having this kōrero, and I just want to mihi to you first and foremost, Tuini, because I went on this big journey of wanting just to talk with Tāne specifically, and that was because of wanting to just create wānanga with Tāne to support Tāne who are going through things. And so I kind of went down that huarahi last year. And so now having you here and having a wahine sit across, one of the things that I'm really keen to highlight, which I may align with some of the kōrero that we have shared, is just we're talking about atua, we're talking about, being out in the stars. And as a wahine, what are you connecting to? Are there atua wahine that you're tuning into mostly, or what are some of the kōrero that comes in from your POV as a wahine in these spaces and connecting to the taiao?
Yeah, that's a very good patai. I am not, energy is definitely a big thing that I draw to, but I draw more to a masculine energy.
Oh.
And I also was raised with the kōrero that he haere rua ngā mea katoa I tēnei ao, ma te ora, wahine tāne, tapu noa. And so my relationship to atua in terms of atua wahine tāne rānei is more comes from a balance point of view. There are some times where at times I need to draw to atua tāne or atua wahine, but sometimes I look at the same atua having different energies. And so, but in saying that, I do know a lot of kōrero tuku iho in terms of atua, but I also like to kind of not create my own, but connect in a way where it feels like I can understand them. And so in terms of wind, sometimes tawhiri could have male traits where quick kind of goes everywhere, but sometimes seems like it's going to a direction towards the end. But that could also mean that sometimes it could be wahine where I got told a kōrero and I really, really resonated with it, is that sometimes wahine just go like blind in terms of lashing out.
Yeah.
And sometimes toe, and then like the next minute it's like very vicious. And so sometimes, a few people could look at Tawhiri as a woman. But I guess it's just our perspective on how we can connect to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the same with tangaroa, with wainui sometimes, tangaroa sometimes, Moana sometimes, depending on what I need from them. That's when I draw for different energy. But essentially they're all not the same, but just different parts of the same thing.
Man, I get that. I get that, particularly how you're sort of saying, like, depending on where you are and what you're picking up on.
Yeah.
Because what it is, it's a relational thing, eh?
Yeah.
Ki ngā mea katoa is like, if you're wherever you are within yourself. And I guess an example for me, and it might be similar, but it might not be, is that there's been times where I've gone out and I'm feeling like real low. And it could be things that are going on in life. And then I'll just go and sit out. There's this one time I went and sat out on the sand dunes and I just looked out and Moana was just like pumping, like real rough.
Yeah.
I was like, holy hell, that looks exactly how I feel.
Yeah.
And then it gave me like a real settling feeling just in terms of being able to see that, because the other whakaaro that came to mind right away was yesterday it was clear, it was calm. And so how I'm feeling now, I might not feel like this tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so let me just be present with it though.
Yeah.
And let me feel into it as Moana was doing her thing. Let me just do my thing in this and just like let it pass rather than the resisting it. And so have you had any experiences like that in terms of your connection to taio based on how you're feeling, and what are some tohu or some kōrero that you'll be open to share?
Yeah, definitely. So obviously I love the water. Koera tuahi e tau ai ahau. And when I am going through heavy times in my life, I'm very an inward person. I like to be alone, but that's also with the water. And not necessarily awa or roto or definitely ocean. And so ka haere au kia tangaroa, e tehi wā kia hine moana. And if they are rough, then, and I'm going through the same thing, I'm the same. Ka tau ahau. But I would always go in, no matter how, like there was a storm maybe 2 months ago here on the West Coast, very heavy floods. And I drove out to Piha and I was going through some pretty heavy times, and I went into the water. It was only me. But I felt the safest.
Dang.
That I could feel.
I've been out to Piha a couple of times and that's pretty hearty out there.
Piha is probably like my most like ideal beach here, and not ideal, just the place where I feel tau and tamaki.
To feel safety in that though? Wow.
Yeah, and I sat under the waves and I just watch the water go over me. And it makes me feel at home. And it actually helps me to settle myself and calm my nervous system first, and then I would always come out and I would usually either write a karakia or a poem or a moteatea. And I'll write it to myself, and always in te reo Māori.
Is that to capture what you're going through at that time and experience, or?
It's to express myself and my feelings so that I could understand it in a way that makes sense to me. I never show them to anybody unless I'm talking about it with somebody. But it's something that helps me release how I'm feeling in a way that makes me feel whole.
And tau,
yeah,
bringing yourself back to neutrality.
Yeah.
Which is a very, very awesome and healthy practice, by the way, tuhine. But, just to see that imagery of just knowing where you are and going into spaces that, from the outset or for someone else, but man, I'm not going out there.
Yeah.
But you're like, I'm in there.
Yeah, definitely.
But then being inspired by that action and I guess like giving meaning to what it is that you're going through, a waiata, through a moteatea. And so that's really, really cool that you have that space. And what was coming up for me is that's a momo like pure,
Yeah.
It's a momo pure, kia whakanoa. But, do you have any practices like that get you ready, to go into voyages? Talk about the lead up into this recent voyage. Like, what were the things that you're like setting intentions or like getting yourself ready, prepared? Like, take us through a bit of a lead up into your guys, like your send off.
Yeah, so I allowed myself 6 months prior to leaving where I was going to be intentional about how I move. Now, in saying that, those 6 months in terms of mahi were still full on. But even with it being full on, it was kind of good for me because I needed to be under pressure all the time with minimal sleep. So sleep deprivation was a practice that I had trained for that whole entire 6 months.
So you went into it tired.
Yeah, I did. Well, I went into it strong enough to, no, not even strong enough, just strong and trained to withstand the thoughts that I would have of tiresome thoughts.
Wow.
So I went into it knowing that I can do it, with confidence. Because I had trained myself to sleep at least 4 hours, and there were some nights where I would do full nights. And by myself, it's the hardest. Like when you're alone and you've only got your why to keep you on, nobody else is looking, you ain't got a camera up or anything like that. Because I did start filming, but there were some parts of the lead up where I needed to be with me and them only. And so I had bought a truck that has a camper on it so I could do those things. And I had moved to my friend's house in Waiuku, and that was a big part of helping me not disconnect from the world's responsibilities and social life, but to reconnect with Te Taiao. I would, sleep in the truck so I could watch the stars. I would sit in the driveway because I could see like at least 180 degrees of the sky, or I would watch a sunrise and a sunset, but not to like
get lost in it.
Yeah. It wasn't to bathe in it or anything. It was so that I knew where the sun was and how the sun could guide me. And so I can find direction or calculate time, because non-instrumental, so not even allowed to watch to calculate time. And the sun.
How is it confusing? Like, because I don't even know if I'm imagining it, because obviously the sun will come up from the east and the west. So does it always move in that direction, or is it like out in front of you? Like, how do you get lost with time if it's moving in the same direction?
If it was the same, it would be much easier.
Yeah.
But it's
but
not.
Does the sun move like?
No, so he goes up towards north.
Yeah.
And then he'll come down towards the west, but it'll go west, southwest. However, he doesn't always rise due east. I actually had this conversation last night. But he sometimes further south, sometimes further north. And so you've got to know where he is. So that's why we talk about Hine Takurua, Hine Raumati. His two wives, because for 3 months he would spend time with Hine Raumati, and he'll rise there, and it'll take him about 7 hours to go north, and then 7 hours to come back, down to the western side. But that's further south. And then when he's with Hine Takurua, it'll take him about 5 hours to reach his highest point in the north, and then 5 hours to set northwest. And that's summer, that's winter. And then equinox moment, so that's March and September. And then we have spring and autumn, which is like 6 hours to get to the north, which is his highest point. And then 6 hours down. And so once you can understand that, and then understand, okay, that's 7 hours, so I can break up the sky into, so he moves
into little
15
segments.
He moves 15 degrees every hour.
Yeah.
And so once you understand those different things, then you can calculate time a little bit better.
And is that necessary for certain things around like when the sun's rising, or like where you are on the Moana? Like is knowing that time really helpful for navigation? Obviously.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's kind of everything.
So is it time? What other things are you measuring as a
Navigator measures time, direction, and then speed.
Okay.
But that's just to understand your distance over the course that you're taking. But mainly the job of the navigator is to see the island. So even if I'm here and we were navigating to Samoa, I have to see Samoa from here.
From me.
So we would have to go outside and you tell me where's Samoa and I have to point it to you. Yeah, and that's what a navigator's job to help you do that is understanding time, direction, so that you can cover a speed and get a distance to get there.
To get there, so time, distance, and speed.
Yeah.
And so using distance, is that when you're like looking at the stars because of where you are, like, or is that part of direction? That's the direction, would be the stars.
Direction is stars, but also distance.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So stars, so celestial bodies like sun, moon, stars, and planets. Those are the first that we learn about, and then we learn wind, swell, and then like weather systems, and like manu, ika, that'll help us. Because what the amazing thing is about manu and ika, which have a couple of hair, and some waves and stuff tattooed on me, but what ika and manu do is that they make your island bigger than what it is.
Because they're close to it. Is that what?
Yeah, or they go out a bit of a distance and you will be able to see them and you'll be able to see, okay, if I can see that manu, it's a land bird. So maybe within 30 to 60 nautical miles, we have it land, Whereas our islands are small. They're not too high. So from the ocean point of view, you have to be really close until you see the island. But if you've got manu that will fly out a bit, then you've created an island. And so those beautiful things, or migrations like the whales or the kuaka, they help with guidance. So they give you direction as well.
So these are all tohu.
Tohu, yeah. And the same as with direction would be the sun, star, moon. And then if you cannot see them based on cloud cover, which is the majority of the time.
True, eh?
Yeah. My one was definitely full cloud cover until we saw the island.
Yeah.
Till like maybe the night before. But then you use the wind in as well. Yeah. Which is a little bit more difficult because they change. They change where sun, moon, stars and planets don't.
And the same.
Yeah.
It's a pattern you can follow.
Yeah.
But the wind and the swell changing
they
all the time. Can you talk more about that? Because I think from us on the land, we're just thinking, oh man, he's just having the meanest time out there. And you fellas probably are, but what are some of those challenges, I suppose, that you can, I guess, humanize or share in terms of, what are some of the things that you've gone through, whether it's the stress or the worry, if there is any, or, being out there, on Te Moana Nui a Kiwa?
My experience is definitely different to everyone else's. I didn't feel lost at all. I always knew where I was. But that was because I want to become a navigator. Like I'm not battling myself to become a navigator. And that's, I think, is a big thing because when you're trying to live up to an expectation from yourself, that I should know this stuff because I've been training for it in comparison to
I am.
Yeah. It's like a different position to be in.
Yep.
And so I was very lucky that within those 6 months and also the whole 10 years, I had that attitude because I have always wanted to be a navigator. And
you were a navigator before you even left there.
Yeah, well, really? That's what you would hope because I had a responsibility to the lives of first my crew, like my whānau, but then to their whānau and to the people that they were leaving behind. And that's the hardest thing. Like we've got the easy job going out doing what we love. The hardest job is always the ones that are staying back because they won't know. And we were very fortunate this time to be able to film stuff on my GoPro and then, the whānau could see us even though we couldn't see them. So we filmed stuff on the GoPro and then we gave it to our captain. He was the only one that could communicate with everyone else. And so he would send them through and then my sister would edit and then put some stuff up. But that was, from what I hear from the whānau, made them feel toe because, it's the unknown at this stage. Like nav or voyaging is still very on the rare side. But prior to our voyage, there were only 4 navigators in Aotearoa who had navigated non-instrumentally from one island to another. And since then, there are another 7. But, just the amount of people that are doing this stuff.
Tokoiti, man.
Yeah, tokoiti. And so for the whānau, it's like, what am I, like for my parents, especially now that I think about it in terms of me, I didn't really give them the opportunity to say no to me when I was young. I told them I'm going on a waka for 2 months. And my mum looked at me, although I could see she wanted to cry, she trusted that because of how happy I was, that she was going to let me go. And my dad didn't say anything. But I was just even that, to have parents that will allow you to go in the ocean, people that you don't know. If I was a parent, I don't know if I would do the same. Now that I think about it,
they're just letting you follow that intuition or their guidance. Man, well, and I think about their first story that you spoke about, just how happy you were out there. The freedom, the adventure, and when you're not in that sense of responsibility, is that part of you is what's present the most, but as soon as you put on the responsibility hat, that just has to go for a bit of a whakata,
you know? That was really good, because that's what when I had come back, it was something that I had yarned about with a few of my close friends, and I didn't realise that even by being the young Hinerapa and the one that is having fun, but also being challenged as well, was also responsibility. I felt like to fulfill responsibility, I needed to do all of these other things as well, because I wasn't here, because here was for me. And voyaging was for me, when I didn't actually realize that, no, that you're still holding a responsibility, especially because there are only 4 navigators at the moment. And the oranga o taua kaupapa, in a way, was in my hands as well. Whereas at the moment, te reo's fine. Tiganga's fine. Voyaging and exercising, actively practicing our kaupapa is a responsibility that I think is where we're going towards now in terms of te ao Māori. And even with te reo, there's, and that was something that actually Rangi had talked about, was that te reo is at a good space now, but now we need to whakatinana your kōrero and bring them back alive. And so I guess for me is trying to change, or trying to accept that it's okay to not just voyage, but to put all of your efforts into voyaging now. And so, that's something that I'm still
that's purposeful, man, particularly when we think about that's how we got here.
Yeah.
And now you're part of the kāhui, tokoiti o koutou engari. You fellas are the ones pioneering the space, and because of these voyages that you've gone on recently, there's more eyes on it now, there's more interest, and because of your mahi in the content space, that really, I guess, because that's the way that we stay up to date with things now, that way, but you actually put a little bit of mahi into the content to create awareness of your guys' mahi, which has probably created more interest, and man, I can see myself in Hinerapa, I can see myself in the bros and everyone else, and so it's just cool to see that, man, there's a shift happening and there's going to be more interest. And what are you hoping to see in that space?
Definitely wahine in the space, and our kids, just it becoming normal for them, and if they wanted to, then they could, but also for it to be valued enough so that there's funding set aside for it. Because we can't, there's so many things around doing things for kaupapa, which I totally understand. But at the same time, we're killing ourselves.
Yeah, straight up.
I'm how can we be rich in culture when we are dying just to function? I need to put kai on the table. I want a whare, my own whare, whenua, Moana. I can't do that with no money. And that doesn't mean
just Māori currency going on,
it really is. And you're trying to manage all of these other jobs and contracts.
Yeah.
And trying to free up space and time for this, but then your energy that you're giving to it is like depleted. And so it's not, the quality isn't that great. And I'm thinking, wanting financial assistance in Te Ao Māori these days is slowly changing, but there's still a big stigma around it. Even having nice things as a Māori has a big stigma around it, whereas I want to see us thriving in both worlds, to be rich in culture and also have monetary richness as well.
Hard out.
But if others can do it that are from other cultures, why can't we? Like, it's a more of a quality thing and leveling up in terms of not necessarily materialism, but being able to do things.
It's a resource, eh?
Resource.
It's just having the resource.
We have no resources. Absolutely none.
Yeah.
And
look how well we're still doing though, eh?
Yeah.
Like, we're still doing with lack of resource. So imagine with resource. And, you know, I think when you think about kaupapa, or even yourself, is that, you know, we've probably done kaupapa for aroha all the time and, you know, pai hoki tera. But when you do kaupapa that you're aligned with and you're getting reciprocated, like even better, you know? And so we just need to like tip the scale that way a little bit, eh? And I think there is a shift in that though. I can see it in the creative spaces and the contract spaces, and I honestly feel, which is a good segue actually, to where we are within ourselves individually first. You know, can we break through those limitations, their whakamau, those stigmas? Can we actually push through so that we can have the bravery just to be like, okay, me whakatinana. This is my worth, and I need to just own that. And I also saw that you're part of Toronuku, you know, which is the sister Kristen's kaupapa, and I think it's those kinds of spaces there that give us the mirror, as well as just being able to reflect and see, okay, this is my value, and now I can build the strength and the awareness and the clarity, like, okay, let me just step out there. And so do you think that kind of space, because I love personal development, personal growth, and being around others and learning, do you think that part there is really important for just ourselves individually, but these other bigger things like going on voyages or starting a pakihi or, you know, whatever that looks like?
I think that's probably the most important step in terms of starting something, is having that even want to grow inside of you and develop yourself, whether that's in business or in reo or in anything that you desire, is to have that want and working through all of our weaknesses and holding on to our strengths and also developing those as well. Because there's also conversations that I have in my head around putea. So that was also another thing. I love business and I am in that world at the moment and trying to develop a portfolio for myself. But there are conversations that I have with myself around humility that kind of becomes a barrier. Because of, and so, you know, kaore te kumare kōrero tana kireka is definitely a kōrero that can cause battle within yourself. And so within these recent years, I have become a little bit more, have a bit of a back on myself now, whereas being humble is also, e te ao Māori, te whakahihi Māori is a bit different, you know. Doing a waiata, for example, he mō teate, and you're smiling and you're happy and you are saying every word of pride and you're doing a pukana and you're doing an aringa to express that. He whakahihi Māori te and it could be a waiata about the your own iwi or your own hapu, which may look like, you're being a bit cocky. Or it can look like, they're proud. And that's another sense of humility, is that I'm not putting you down, but what's wrong with me
being proud,
because it's not doing anything, you know? And
Love
so
that.
Those kinds of kōrero that we can talk about these days around our whakatauki, that the kumara is also not showing that it's, you know, not nice.
Everyone else is just saying how nice it is. The kumara doesn't know it's nice.
So it doesn't know it's nice. So why do we hold on to it? So much to say that we need to belittle ourselves. You know, and so those kinds of, I think our self-talk is something that I think is very important when we're starting out. And that's definitely been my best friend in terms of, and all of that comes from my parents, my grandparents, and my kura.
Beautiful.
Because they spoke goodness into me. They said that I could be anything I want. They said that I'm special, that I come from the heavens, that I'm a seed sown, into life that deserves to be given the world, and cherished and all of those things. And it saddens me when I hear that that's not how it is for our people, even though it should be.
There's way more weeds that people are actually battling with, which is the I'm not enough, I'm not good, which is I'm not so and so. There's more of that is the common dialogue, and even a lot of the subconscious programming, which means it's the deeper beliefs. We might say, look in the mirror like I'm amazing, but far off that belief system is, I guess, on fractured floors, then it's always going to be the thing that comes through. And I like how we kind of kōrero and segue into seeds, because it's really that, and he kākano I rui mai I rangi Aotea. And so you can't become a potato if you were born a kumara.
Yeah.
And so it's like, just be yourself. And if that does become something that people perceive as whakahihi, well, that's something that we can't attach ourselves to, because that's what often happens. We walk into rooms and we might have that sense of pride, but we have a habit of making ourselves small to make other people comfortable or feel good, as opposed to like, nah, let me be proud. And if that makes you uncomfortable, that's not on me to actually deal with that. And that's something that I feel aligns with authenticity, being proud, being comfortable in yourself, is just having those kinds of traits. And it happens, it just happens sometimes. We just walk into spaces or around people and we just sort of, me iti. And there's spaces for that, depending on the circumstances, which means we have to have a level of awareness around, okay, what spaces am I in? And just, I guess, having that kind of pause first and foremost before we start to engage, which takes a lot of mahi in terms of sharpening that awareness tool. But I just think, similar to you, that it's the foundation for all things, is our relationship with ourselves. And if you've been fortunate, such as yourself, to have amazing kōrero spoken over your life, or even just being taught through kura, then that gives you like more clearer passage to that, whereas a lot of our whānau who perhaps haven't had that, it doesn't take away the efforts into making that strong in terms of living more authentically. And so I want to give it over to you, Tuini, and we only scratched the surface, really. We haven't even left the dock. But I would love to, I guess, pass it over to you, kia whakakapi and kōrero, and really would like to encourage, just some kōrero to empower our wahine. If you were to think about yourself as a younger version of you, and, what were some things, although you had some amazing things spoken, what do you think that little version of yourself needed, knowing that where you are now, or even just some other kōrero that perhaps is at the top of your mind or on your manawa to share?
If I relate it back to waka, in that voyage to Rapa Nui, I had it on my pinky. And the voyage to Rapa Nui, where they had 43 days. One of the waka, and it's not their fault, but I just want to highlight what our tikanga say. One of the waka had only tāne on it, and which I was trying to follow the kōrero saying that only men came on our waka, some of the waka. Not all of them had women. And the difference about that now, and this is saying even if it was women on a waka, there would be certain imbalances. Now, for the men, they didn't really think too much. They were quick, but a lot of things broke because of brute force and not really reading certain signs, maybe. I don't know. But the hoi broke 9 times. And they had to use the resources that they had on the waka. They couldn't just simply dock up anywhere and repair the hoi. So they took out different floorboards, and so the deck had a few holes, bed boards, some of those things, and even toda. There wasn't enough toda. And then, I don't know if the woman would appreciate me talking about this, but there was a waka where there were only women. And they went out and there was a storm. And unfortunately, one of the women got injured between a hoi and the side of the waka and broke a few ribs. Now, I'm not saying men can't do that, but at times women think too much and we don't react too fast. That's just how we are naturally. Majority of women. There are some women that are. Men are on the opposite. But we need both. Sometimes we need to think a little bit more about certain things so that the next hoi doesn't break and we only have one breakage. Whereas a woman, sometimes we need a little bit of strength. Even though we are strong, naturally men are stronger. And naturally they can quickly react instead of women like, oh, what do I do?
Too late.
Men are too late, we're already gone. So there are certain strengths and that women have and men have. And at the moment, in Te Waka, there's a huge imbalance where it's majority men and not enough women. And just from a normal human being way of being doesn't mean you need a voyage, but just to be a part of the kaupapa so that it grows more. If that's where you want to be and there's something in you that's telling you, we neglect our intuition way too much these days because we need to pay the bills or we need to do X,
the
Y,
nervous
and Z.
system is shot, so it actually can't get their clear comms.
No. And even there's like maybe subconsciously and unconsciously we do things that don't align with who we are and we become very unhappy. Whereas some people prefer being on the water. Some people like to manaki through food. Some people like to lead. On the waka, you have so many of those roles that you could do. You could either be the person at home that's doing all the logistics, airports, accommodation at different islands, knowing who the chiefs are, communicating with the different villages of the different islands, gift giving, making rongoa, so many things that involve waka that you can be a part of. And if that's calling you, and this is something where you get a epiphany or something, like follow it. Like that's one thing that we need to hold on, especially in a world full of distractions, is to remember. And so that's probably the kōrero that I had. Yeah.
I was going to look at wrapping up, Tuna, but we touched on a nice thread here.
Okay, yeah.
And it was around nervous system because I really loved the kōrero around balance, masculine, feminine, whatukura, Māori kura, and our wahine are very, very intuitive. And my wahine reminds me all the time, actually. Even though I challenge you, always are like, I knew,
Yeah.
Sure enough, she did, because of that strong intuition. And a big part of that is creating safety first and foremost. Stay within yourself as a wahine, which is regulating the nervous system. Because if it's in survival mode or if it's in stress, then, man, those comms just aren't actually following through and you can't hear. And so what do you do as a practice, I guess, to calm your nervous system? We've spoken a little bit about it, but if we just hone in on this, aligning it to intuition, what are some of the things that you practice? Kia rongo ai koe, ia koe anō.
If I think daily, definitely training. I work out every day. Breathing, and talking to my mum, because she's like a good soundboard for me. One, because she knows who I am, but two, because I like who I am with my mum. And that's I'm a daughter. I'm not the older sister. I'm not the one that needs to pay for X, Y, and Z. I'm not the one that needs to send a presentation through. I'm not the one that needs to have kōrero already for a panel. I'm a daughter. And that
you can be looked after.
Yeah, and I can be looked after. And so even and then, my nervous system is already calm by just getting to my mum. Going to my marae is a big one. And there are times, so previously we knew how to open up our whare, but we can't open it up anymore. But I would go and sit in our whare by myself and just cry, And I'm not a crier, but I do understand the rongoa in crying. And sometimes, and I definitely draw to tikanga Māori and what our tikanga tell us in terms of rongoa, like karanga. There are times where our kuia cry, and not many times you would hear in the karanga there are women crying anymore, maybe because our generation are not there yet in terms of maturity, but there's a certain release that we get. And when I hear kuia cry, and I know that there's something alive within me, at that time, it helps me release. And so those are different practices that I would go through. Breathing, I recently read a book called Breath, and, it talks about how we can last a few weeks without food, only a few days without water, but only a few minutes without breathing. But it's one fundamental part of our life that we neglect. And so breath work has been, and not necessarily new, because my kuia always practiced breath work. And even just memory as well, remembering my kuia, her presence. She always had a beautiful whare that was like just before what voodoo could be, like it was like she had essence going real clear, like the windows were open, the windows were also like there was no dust on it, and she would wipe them every day and the air would flow through it. That was very important to her. Crystals, amethyst everywhere. And I didn't know how important that was for me, but we would, no matter who walked in through those doors, you would always feel toe. And so that memory of her is enough for me to calm my nervous system. And those are things that I rely on. Not rely on, but things that I like to tap into every day so that I can be regulated, because that is important, especially when you get a certain awareness around your subconscious and unconscious mind. And then you can see, okay, what's going on, and you can't always not change it, but try and, with my conscious mind, you can quickly control that.
That's right.
But just ways where I can have a new script in those spaces as well.
You're touching on some real good things there. And I, like, as much as I don't know about wahine, what I've learned mostly, however, is around wahine whether it's a desire, a craving, or a need, or might even just be something else, but safety is what I've learned is paramount. And for us as tāne, like, that's what we should be creating in terms of that sense of protective, but not just being out there like, going guns blazing, but it's like creating the environment so our wahine can fold into their femininity. That's something that we can do as tāne to support wahine in many different spaces. Doesn't have to be in relationship, but just in any space you're occupying, in friendships and things of that nature. But then the other thing is coming into what we can do on an individual basis, say, and exercise, getting those endorphins out, getting that riri out is a big one, getting some PBs helps as well. And then the you're very, very true, right in that, in terms of how we often overlook something that we do every single day, every single second. And it's more the conscious breathing, more nasal breathing. And the more nasal breathing we can do, the more diaphragm activation we can have, which creates a different signal to the mind. And so, it's cool that you've been able just to plant a few of those seeds there for our wahine, but also for the whānau who are listening, just around nervous system regulation and the importance of balance, right? The importance of balance. And if we can really find those two energy sources within ourselves, which helps us to, I guess, allow the seed that we are to express itself fully, whether it's in waka haurua, whether it's in podcasting, whether it's on the CrossFit floor, whether it is kayako. That's something that is inspiring for anyone. And if you're in tune with yourself, you won't see the whakahihi in there. You'll be proud in yourself, which will be able to see that, man, you just see that person expressing, and you can draw something from it rather than wanting to bring it down. So, Hinerapa, thank you for sharing some of your pukenga. Thank you for having this kōrero. And now I can see why your name has been mentioned a few times. So thank you to Ahine Mihana kia koe, and to everyone else tuning in. Drop in your favourite part, like, subscribe, all that, and see you in the next one. Ngā mihi.